Welcome to Real Authority. Today I'm talking about The Bride, the next big screen Frankenstein adaptation, even though the last Frankenstein adaptation was sent straight to Netflix with only a limited release, so I was unlucky enough to just see it on my couch. But now we got a big screen adventure, so let's go. Simple premise, it basically follows in the blueprints of the typical Bride of Frankenstein formula in which Christian Bale plays Frankenstein, who's dying of loneliness, so he basically encourages this scientist played by Annette Bening to basically dig up a corpse. And then they basically resurrect the corpse, in which Jessie Buckley now gets to be the bride of Frankenstein, or just the bride, as the trailers were kind of making that point. I can't explain why, but even though I wasn't exactly expecting this to be like a good movie, even from the first trailer, something about it did pique my interest to the point where, yeah, I was excited. As you saw in my Hoppers review, I said even though it probably didn't have a chance of being as good as Hoppers, before seeing Hoppers, I was actually more excited for that. Maybe it was because of the fact my first impression was seeing the trailer on an IMAX screen, and usually when films are filmed for IMAX, they usually just look superior in IMAX format. I'll get to that in a little bit, but I'm not going to factor that into the score because I really do want to separate the experience with the actual contents of the movie. But yeah, I wasn't exactly looking for a fantastic movie, and even before I saw Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, I still was interested in it, and after Frankenstein, it's like, yeah, this movie has no chance. And also, it was delayed a few times to the point where there was speculation that would probably be like Joker Folie à Deux, in which it might be a tap dancing musical. Luckily, it's not. I was kind of expecting it to probably fall into that category of a Joker Folie à Deux situation, but I was hoping to still be entertained because you got Christian Bale and Jessie Buckley in this movie, two talented actors. In fact, the latter is about to potentially win her first Oscar. It's a competitive Oscar season, though, so yeah. But I also respect how committed they were to the costume and production designs evident from the trailer, so even if the movie didn't work, like Wuthering Heights, its visual appeal would probably win me over, and to an extent it did, but yeah, I guess starting off with that, the set and costume designs, like, some of it may be weird in keeping with the rest of the nature of the movie. I'll get to it in a minute, but definitely the best part of this movie are the production, set, and costume designs. They look flawless, and I am very happy that it landed the way it did. Granted, it was kind of a guarantee at this point that whether I liked the movie or not, it would just look beautiful, and it does. Plus, although I do have issues with the script, Christian Bale and Jessie Buckley definitely do their best and give solid performances, even in the midst of the chaos. Whether it's a positive or negative connotation, again, I'll get to in a minute. I mean, Bale is definitely the lesser of the two. He definitely phones it in a bit, but I do feel like with his character, it kind of leans to the strengths, but I will admit this is probably one of Bale's weaker performances. Not bad by any stretch of the word. It's still good, but definitely not his strongest performance at all. Buckley, on the other hand, I will admit her performance in Hamnet was better, but it's definitely a showcase of her talent. Plus, this is, I think, her first, like, big screen, mega-ish blockbuster effort, and I do feel she carries herself solidly well, coming extraordinarily close to elevating the script. Like, she understands it to the point where, yes, its issues show up, but you also can't help but admire what Buckley did. Maggie Gyllenhaal, I haven't seen any of her previous writing or directorial efforts. Like many other people, I know her for starring in movies like The Dark Knight. But I do feel with the directing, less so the screenplay, but with the directing, it's definitely ambitious. And said ambition leads to a lot of solid moments, not only in terms of, well, some of the goofiness, I guess, maybe. Some dramatic moments did work, but I do feel in terms of like the execution, it could be better, significantly so. But usually on the surface, the directing's pretty solid, and Maggie Gyllenhaal, yeah, she did a solid job. The composer of 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, was brought on to score this, and I do feel he did a solid score. The cinematography complements the production and costume designs incredibly well and just makes it look beautiful. Considering my expectations, I cannot help but be disappointed with how the rest of the movie turned out. Like, I won't say it's awful by any means because, again, the stuff I mentioned so far, they're good. But starting off with the screenplay, again, her directing's good, but Gyllenhaal's screenplay can't help but feel disjointed in a lot of places. Granted, I heard that Warner Bros. Actually cut down the violence and the content for being too gratuitous. And the movie as is, it still has a lot of that violence as well as gratuitousness and trying to push the envelope too far, but I do feel it's to its detriment because it tries to be numerous things. It wants to be a dark comedy, a dark romance, a horror movie, and the screenplay, with all of its cutting downs and such, just can't help but feel confused in a lot of places. Spoiler, yeah, a brief spoiler. They actually include Mary Shelley as a character, the original author of Frankenstein, who comes back every now and again to the movie, but the way she's introduced just puts a heavy asterisk on the rest of the experience, confusing the narrative deeply. Like, in a way, you can absolutely remove her from the story. Like, it's obviously a way for Gyllenhaal to bring a bigger point home. I'm not going to say what point it is, not only because of spoilers, but because the movie doesn't do a great job at bringing that point home, so I can't even tell you whether or not the point I got was the actual point. But yeah, it's super ridiculous, especially considering the fact that it adds an angle which the movie rarely explores. I feel like it should have gone for a more conventional approach of basically this tragic or crazy love story between Frankenstein's monster as well as the bride. But instead, it tries to juggle so many things that it ultimately comes across as, I don't know, huge swing. Kind of a miss. Like, the time period of the 1930s definitely allows the movie to go in inventive ways, but I feel like its only success is with the production and costume designs, because the movie does try to provide commentary that is well intentioned, I will give it that, but when the movie's trying to be goofy, it kind of just contrasts. There are moments where they're commentating on the state of women's rights back then and how men just abused their power to take advantage of women. But they do feel put in there for the sake of it instead of, bringing home a message. It just feels like it's the 1930s. This is what happened. Sure. I don't know. That angle and that tone is conflicting with the 3 or more other tones that this movie is trying to convey. Like, it does try to be goofy. In fact, a lot of people in my theater laughed while I was just like, that was kind of lame. So it just feels like the movie doesn't know where it wants to go. And the amount of complexities to the plot just kind of makes you feel lost in a lot of places, especially with the Mary Shelley angle, because again, you should have just simply done the romance story, and I think it would have been good. It's to the point where you can think of other movies that did it better. Even though I haven't seen Bonnie and Clyde, this movie definitely resembles what Bonnie and Clyde feels like. I could probably assume that it's not as good as Bonnie and Clyde, but just all the places that the plot tries to go, it just feels disjointed, especially with the dialogue. I'm not going to say it's awful, but there are a lot of moments where it's like, what were you trying to do? There are a lot of moments where the bride just says awkward things to the point where you don't even know why they're there. There are moments where the bride decides to rhyme in a movie in a time where it shouldn't make sense for the character to rhyme. It was just implemented there because fine, and it just doesn't make any sense. It just feels like dialogue bleh because dialogue bleh. But also, considering the fact that it doesn't entirely focus on a straightforward plot, there are other characters which gain little to no development, not to the level of like Scream 7 development, because yeah, that was just kind of but still not developed enough for you to care. It's really only the 2 main characters that you ultimately care about, because the rest of them are just brushed so aside that whenever you focus on them, it's kind of bleh. Aside from the detective characters, Peter Sarsgaard and Penelope Cruz, like, they have a decent enough dynamic, and I feel like they sometimes overshadow the main characters. Sometimes they get the most development out of the undeveloped characters, but not to the point where you're like, yeah, I'm engaged. Which is to say that the movie is so excruciatingly boring, and a lot of the tedium is due to that disjointed nature, which doesn't relent. It tries to focus on the main plot sometimes, but then it just goes in its own direction, trying to be creative for the sake of it. And I do feel, well, sometimes that may work, you gotta understand when to implement it effectively, and it just doesn't work to the point where it does feel stagnant a lot of the time and like nothing's happening. I don't really know what else to say. Maybe I'm going in circles, I'm not sure, but I do feel The Bride is one of the most disappointing movies of the year, even though I didn't expect something on the same level as Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. But for a movie this crazy and chaotic, it really doesn't know how to do the chaos in an effective manner. Also, before I forget, the trailers in IMAX were making it seem like it was full aspect ratio, but it's a Mission Impossible Final Reckoning situation where the trailers were kind of deceptive. Like, most of the movie is in that expanded IMAX ratio, but not all of it, so yeah. Again, the production and costume designs are stellar, and Jessie Buckley and Christian Bale are good. You may be able to get away with waiting until streaming, and considering how, I don't know, creative IMAX usually is, in spite of it not realizing its full potential, you may be able to get away with seeing it in theaters, but otherwise, yeah, I can't say I'm a fan. No, that's too harsh because it would inadvertently make Joker 2 better than it, so I'll ramp it up. It's not good enough to approve, it's not bad enough to reject. If you're curious, wait until streaming. 5 out of 10. Make sure you leave a like, subscribe to the channel, to our postifications, and comment your thoughts on the movie. And definitely let me know what your favorite Frankenstein adaptation is. If you haven't seen all of them, is Guillermo del Toro's better? Probably is, but you know what? You never know. Peace.